Hello, everyone, and welcome to the StarCraft Evolution League Season 1 storyline. My name is Cruz, often seen online as Cruz for Prez or Anti-Cruz, and I will be your unofficial guide to the end of the first season. I'm hoping this is something that'll be fun, both for those that watched the first season as it happened, and those who would like to learn more. This piece is intended as a video podcast, mainly focused on what I see as the biggest overall storyline in the first regular season of the StarCraft Evolution League, or SEL, which is thus far the largest league using the StarCraft Evolution Complete mod, which adds the StarCraft 1 Brood War races into StarCraft 2, pitting them both against each other. While we'll definitely discuss several of the SEL's strongest players and some of their individual tournaments or series, the main emphasis will be on a broader season arc, so generally specific tournaments won't be covered in as much detail. With that out of the way, I can think of no better place to begin our journey than by introducing the player that set the bar for success in the first season of the SEL. This is none other than the Crown Prince himself, Team HyperONE's 3-Point. In truth, 3-Point was busy making a name for himself from the very inception of the StarCraft Evolution competitive scene, even before the existence of the SEL itself. You see, before there was an SEL, there was the Chiswick Morlockin Cup in July of 2024, the first major event in the StarCraft Evolution Complete mod. There, 3-Point was able to take series wins over notable players, including Stats and Sue, making his way to the round of 8. There, he would be double eliminated by TY, who himself would go on to be double eliminated by Dark, the eventual winner of the Morlockin Cup. After the Morlockin Cup, things entered a bit of a lull for 3-Point within SC Evo. This was the case for nearly all players, even a majority of those at the highest level. While there were occasional show matches using the SC Evo mod, shout out to Tasteless and his Tasteless Time Warps, to my knowledge, there were few to zero truly open tournaments in any given month. That would only change with the announcement of the Hyper Star League, as originally named by tournament organizer, team owner, and map maker HyperONE. In time, this event would come to be recognized as the first in a series of tournaments, and these would be called the StarCraft Evolution League. And here is where 3-Point would once more begin to shine, going on a run where he wouldn't drop a single game from the round of 16 through to semifinals. Despite tournament rules forcing players to alternate, each one taking turns, playing one side of the StarCraft 1 versus 2 matchup, it seemed that 3-Point had an overwhelming understanding of both sides of the matchup and both versions of his Zerg, and he would remain untouched until Grand Finals. There, he would be confronted by the Japanese Terran player Psyark from Team Little Fairy. The two would go on to have a back and forth series, reaching a full 5 games. Though it may be worth noting that this series is not only famous for its competitiveness, but also somewhat infamous for the amount of race switching that took place. Most of all, during Game 4, where both players would wind up off racing in an attempt to avoid the all-ins prevalent in the meta at the time. This resulted in 3-Point playing StarCraft 2 Terran and Psyark playing StarCraft 1 Protoss. 3-Point would ultimately take the series 3-2, but in the process of sealing Psyark's fate, he would also seal the fate of mid-tournament race switching, as the Hyper Star League would be the last SEL-related event to allow it. The following tournament in the series, the StarCraft Evolution League number 1, would see a new name at its forefront, and I'm not just referring to the change in title. Game & Gladiator's own Shin, previously known as Ragnarok, would arrive for the first time to the SEL. There, he would immediately begin cutting through the scene, refusing to drop even a single map against DeWalt, Rebellion, and Hanmono. Except, that's not exactly true. The truth is, it was Hanmono, a Korean Terran player based out of Japan and playing for Team HyperONE, that would make the run to finals without dropping a map, eliminating not only Shin in a shutout 2-0 along the way, but also Psyark, who placed second in the last tournament. As is his style, Hanmono would start things off against Shin with some cheese, the evidence of which can be seen here if you're following along, where playing as StarCraft 1 Terran, Hanmono proxied 3 barracks just outside of Shin's linear third, and then came forward with his Marines and SCVs, killing first all the workers at the natural before building a bunker in the main within range of Shin's spawning pool and securing the win in 3 minutes and 9 seconds. However, even after overcoming Shin in semifinals, Hanmono would still have to face his teammate 3 in Grants, and 3 would not be denied. Though Hanmono was able to play him close across a full 5-game series, 3 mastery of StarCraft 1 Zerg, which he played every game, would see him achieve a 3-2 victory. Perhaps things would be different for SEL number 2, which would begin much the same as before with both Hanmono and Shin advancing through the round of 16, but would quickly deviate, as in a direct inverse of their prior match, Shin would go on to shut out Hanmono 2-0. In the semifinals, Shin would go up against series regular and one of the best StarCraft 1 Protoss players in the tournament, Rebellion. However, while Shin would drop the first game of the series to Rebellion's aggressive use of Storm and Reavers, StarCraft 1's premier AoE damage units, Shin would go on to win the series in the following 2 games, playing both one game of StarCraft 1 and another of StarCraft 2, demonstrating his steadily improving grasp of StarCraft Evolution's meta and units. In the finals, this display of dominance would only continue, as Shin would take a clean 3-0 sweep over 3, even as he was forced to play StarCraft 1 Zerg twice in games 1 and 3. However, Shin's victory did not herald the beginning of a dynasty, for SEL number 3 would see him fail to appear in defense of his newly claimed title, leaving the field wide open for those looking to stake their claim to the crown. And at this point, that included a fairly solid upper middle class. All these players were ready to contest for the top spot, as visible in the point system that the SEL was beginning to develop. Composed mostly of amateur players with some prior history in StarCraft 2, this middle class included players such as Rebellion, previously known as Killzing, a Korean Protoss player who with enviable consistency had reached semifinals in 2 of the last 3 events. And it also included our friend Hanmono with 2 quarterfinals and 1 grand finals appearance, as well as the Finnish Zerg player Mixu, who in his first 2 appearances managed to reach semifinals both times, falling only to 3. However, despite his early successes, Mixu would in fact be the first to fall, in this case to the hands of a relative newcomer playing for Team Streamer Zone, the Korean Terran player Quanta. The next to fall would be Rebellion, cleanly shut down by the only prior champion present to defend their claim, 3. On the other side of the bracket, Hanmono would be busy eliminating New Kid on the block Quanta, in the process solidifying and securing a once more all HyperONE finals. In the end, however, the result would not be close, and 3 would take the series, solidifying his claim and reputation as standing head and shoulders above the lesser nobility in the StarCraft Evolution League. Perhaps at this point, the most notable blemish on 3's record, aside from his 1 loss to Shin, would be his unexpectedly serious losing streak on the map Paradox 2. An island map ported over from StarCraft 1 with a highly unusual base setup and very limited mobility, 3 had thus far played on the map 3 times, the map being mandatory in grand finals according to SEL's then regular season rule set. And so far, he'd lost all 3 games. Despite this blemish, it seemed apparent that 3 had more to fear when being tested by outside entrants to the SEL than from his relative peers and regulars within the league, or even from his teammate Hanmono. Such a test seemed poised to occur in SEL number 4 when a new, highly decorated competitor arrived on the scene and registered for the tournament. Classic would enter the SEL to immediate success, cutting through fellow first-time entrants tons of damage and MSRM before confronting Hanmono in the semifinals, where Classic would shut him out entirely. However, things would be different in grand finals, where Classic would be confronted by Rebellion. The fact is, Rebellion would take a game on the highly decorated and veteran Protoss. He would deftly use the greater mobility of StarCraft 2 Protoss to its fullest, and this is a worthy accomplishment. However, this is not the matchup that most were expecting, which begs the questions, what happened? Did Rebellion manage to overthrow the young prince and 3Point's reign over his peers? Or did some other player take that accomplishment for themselves? Unfortunately, the truth is rather less impressive. In the upper path of the bracket, usually assigned to the first seed of a tournament, and in this case assigned to 3Point, the most obvious story is that of his absence. In fact, 3Point failed to make check-in for SEL number 4, and therefore to receive his placing as first seed, for reasons that are still generally unknown. What is clear is that in his absence, players such as Velvet, Rumeath, Quanta, and Rebellion stepped in to fill the gap, which in the end led to Rebellion's defiance against Classic in Grand Finals, and thereafter Classic's dominating victory. SEL number 5 appeared to promise that perhaps things could be differently. For starters, both 3Point and Classic would be in attendance as first and second seeds, respectively, and things went as expected through the round of 16, with each player defeating their opponent. However, this would prove to be a false hope, as Classic would fall in quarterfinals, shut out 2-0 by Dutch Protoss player Boanan, who would demonstrate the cannon rush potential of SE1 pylons, which have 100 more health and 100 more shields than StarCraft 2 pylons. In fact, he demonstrated this not only in Game 1, but also in Game 2, despite Classic's best attempt at a Void Ray rush to counter. While Classic was busy learning about StarCraft 1 pylons at the hands of Boanan, 3Point would be quickly dispatching Ateshi and Rebellion, shutting out both players 2-0 in quarterfinals and semifinals, respectively. Along the bottom track of the bracket, Streamer Zone's Quanta would similarly chew through first Han Mono and then Boanan, setting him up to meet 3Point in Grand Finals. With tournament rules yet unchanged, Grand Finals would begin with the island map Paradox. Upon loading in, 3Point would rarely note his 0% win rate on the island map, but nevertheless resign himself to try and win anyway. Somewhat predictably, he would go on to lose that map, but still take the series. He would go 3-2 over Quanta and claim yet another bi-weekly tournament crown. With the end of the regular season rapidly approaching, it seemed that perhaps 3Point would miss out on, or perhaps manage to escape from, confronting Classic. There was, in fact, just one more chance for the two to meet, one more tournament to complete the story arc of the SEL's first season and test the truth of 3Point's ascension over the first season of the SEL. Luckily for us both and for fans of the SEL everywhere, not only did they both show up to the final SEL of the regular season, but they came ready to play. Each one of them would go on to have a perfect run from the round of 16 through to semifinals, not dropping even a single map. Other players, such as Rebellion, Rumeath, Han Mono, Quanta, or Top, playing under his tag Kiwian, were either soundly defeated or left by the wayside in earlier rounds. And in the end, there was just 2 players left. Before beginning Grand Finals, there are a few rule and map changes that would be in effect that are worth noting, as they are different from our initial overview. Gone would be predetermined race assignments. Instead, the higher-seeded player, 3Point, would be able to pick their side of StarCraft 1 or 2 for maps 1, 3, and 5, whereas Classic would get his choice first on maps 2 and 4. Gone would be also Paradox, the island map that had caused 3Point so many issues. In its place would be a map brand new to the SEL called Troy, a 4-spawn map ported over from StarCraft 1. Troy is known for both its wide-open center, leading to back-and-forth mid-game fights, and for having destructible neutral assimilators just outside your main, which permanently lock you in if destroyed and often incentivize early aggression. Perhaps more confident in his StarCraft 2 Zerg, or wishing to push Classic out of his comfort zone, 3Point would choose to play with his StarCraft 2 Zerg, assigning Classic StarCraft 1 Protoss. Whichever the case it was, Classic was more than ready, and he took to the aggressive possibilities of Troy immediately with a 2-base Zealot all-in. While Classic would not be able to destroy the assimilator gates at the entrance to 3Point's main, seen here at the bottom of the screen if you're viewing along, he would play a complex game of aggression with his Zealots, swarming into and at times past 3Point's natural, threatening to destroy the assimilators and permanently cut him off from his main, whenever he couldn't threaten the natural directly. While 3Point would just barely hold Classic's first round of aggression with Queens and Spines, he would then attempt to transition from Lings to Mutalisks and fail to hold a second wave of Zealots. Classic would secure his Game 1 win in 6 minutes and 17 seconds. Game 2 would confront our players with Monty Hall, a wild StarCraft 1 port with limited ground mobility due to a unique 3-lane MOBA-ish setup. This map was also relatively new to the league, having only been in the pool since SEL number 3. Called a pseudo-island map by Cranky Ducklings Light, among others, 3-Point appropriately had a rather middling record on the map, having gone 1-1 thus far. Classic had even less tournament experience on it, having played on Monty Hall only once, though in a win, which he took over Rebellion. Luckily for Classic, Game 2 would also allow him to take his turn at race selection, and he'd choose his StarCraft 2 Protoss. Which meant that this time it would be 3-Point that would try his hand at an early aggression from the StarCraft 1 side of the matchup. He would attempt to circumvent the early mobility limitations of the map with a 12-pool Worker Zergling all-in. Unfortunately for him, Classic would scout this early, but 3-Point would already be too committed, already working through the mineral walls that impede non-worker units from leaving the main at the start of the game. Classic would then wall off with a Gate, Cybercore, and Zealot, and despite 3-Point's best drone drilling, this wall would mostly successfully hold and lead 3-Point to GG out at 3 minutes and 1 second. This would put Classic one game away from claiming his second SEL tournament and his first completely over 3-Point. Game 3 would see the two players move on to more familiar ground, the StarCraft 2 ladder map Leylines. A fairly standard map by most estimations, one of the most notable features is its array of 4 forward bases, 2 on each side of the center, each with a rich gas geyser, incentivizing somewhat more aggressive mid and late game positioning. Unlike Monty Hall mineral walls, these rich gas geysers would simply not come into effect. Continuing the trend in the series, Classic would take his second turn at the StarCraft 1 side of the matchup in the direction of early aggression. With a build nearly identical to that of their first game on Troy, Classic would open with 2 gateways before taking his natural, and then dedicate himself to ever more Zealots. The first wave of Zealots would stream across the map, and like in Game 1, at first be held off by a combination of Queens, Spines, and Lings. 3-Point, however, had learned from his mistakes in the first game, and the trend lines would stop there. Upon seeing the Zealots, 3-Point immediately threw down a Roach Warren, and the second wave of Zealots would arrive at 3-Point's natural, only to be rolled all the way back to Classic's. While this counterattack would not immediately end the game, it would see 3-Point break Classic's attempt at securing a third and allow him to secure his own third. 3-Point would take this advantage and maintain it for the rest of the game. This led Classic to GG out at 13 minutes and 26 seconds when he arrived to 3-Point's natural to attempt a base trade, only to find it filled with more lurkers than he could possibly storm away, even as 3-Point tore apart his production at home. The fourth game of Grand Finals would see the two players move on to a second 2-spawn StarCraft 2 ladder map, Whispers of Gold, which features plenty of gold theming but no gold minerals. Its hills and valleys, however, alternating paths of high ground interspersed with pockets of low ground, do provide plenty of opportunities both for frontal engagements and creative flanking maneuvers. None of which would be seen, as 3-Point would throw down a 12-pool and pull the boys at a blistering pace, reaching Classic's natural at just 1 minute and 30 seconds, or a little later. The boys would break through first, and while Classic would try to re-wall with pylons, the Lings would break through not even a minute later, and shortly lead to Classic's exit at Game 2 at only 2 minutes and 38 seconds. This would bring us to the ace match of the series, the tournament, and the season, as no matter who won, this would be the final game for the first regular StarCraft Evolution League. And it would be the Brood War ported map Vermeer that would be selected as the battleground. A unique map in the pool, Vermeer was well known in the SEL due to its 3-spawn setup, varied terrain, and longevity, as it was the only map to have remained in the pool since the Hyperstar League that started it all. And now it would be here at the finish, as 3-Point would elect to play with his StarCraft 2 Zerg, assigning Classic to the StarCraft 1 Protoss. And if you guessed that this final game of the season would start off with aggression by these players, you could be absolutely right, as 3-Point would almost immediately open 12-pool, and Classic would move into his own double gateway. The two players would quickly scout each other and shortly after collide just outside of Classic's natural. The battle would be swift and decisive. Things would start with Classic picking off 3-Point's scouting overlord, completely supply blocking him, and while 3-Point would fire back by taking down a Zealot, as the fight wore on, it became increasingly clear he simply could not match Classic's precision firing and Dragoon micro. Classic would take down one of 3Point's Ravagers and successfully retreat, hiding his most wounded Dragoon until he could reach the safety of his shield batteries. And here is where 3Point would tap out. With reinforcements spawning in and Classic's shield battery healing even the wounded Dragoon up to fighting strength, and with 3Point yet to take down more than a single Zealot, there was simply nowhere else to go. And so, 3Point would in the end not be crowned the unquestioned king of the SCL. Classic would take the victory, the pro player would win, and our story ends in tragedy. But only in part, and only a small part at that. Certainly, it ends happily for Classic, and in truth, 3Point had a lot to be proud of. He dominated the season standings, close to doubling the score of the next closest player, Rebellion, and that's even with 3Point's absence for SCL number 4. If Rebellion was to be commended for his consistency at achieving at least some consecutive round of 8 finishes, how much more should 3Point's consistency be recognized? As the crowned prince of Season 1, he successfully reached the finals of every SCL that he attended. And really, almost every part of this storyline represents an unexpected triumph, beginning even with Team Koprulu, who developed the StarCraft Evolution Complete mod in the first place, and going on to the SCL itself, first organized in the mind of HyperONE. Every detail of this narrative is a product of hard work, dedication, and affection for the StarCraft series, and I want to extend my sincere thanks to every person that made any of this possible. Now, while this is the end of this particular storyline, the SCL, including 3Point, Classic, Hanmona, Rebellion, that all continued and continues. This storyline only includes part of the SCL's first regular season. If you think there's anything I've missed or any player that didn't get their time in the spotlight, put it in the comments. Maybe you're right. I know for a fact that I didn't even try to get to the postseason. There's a whole championship there, which features the return of Dark, the first player to win a StarCraft Evolution Major, and Shin, who, as we covered, was the first pro player to play in the SCL, along with many other new and returning players. And even that doesn't even begin to mention that the SCL is currently in the middle of its second season, which is bigger and better than ever before. If you're curious to watch or play, the SCL has a detailed Wikipedia page with future events, and as of the time of this video, the next SCL event is set for Saturday, April 5th. I hope you'll join in. I'll definitely be watching, and I hope to see you there. Lastly, I'd be remiss not to finish without giving some special thanks to some good people. Team Koprulu, which is on Patreon if you want to help them out, are the organizers of the StarCraft Evolution Complete mod. HyperONE, the TO of the SCL, is on Twitch, and there is a Patreon for the SCL. Cranky Ducklings is on basically everything, YouTube, Twitch, and Patreon. Light VIP is on Twitch. Thanks to Light and the Cranky Ducklings for allowing me to use some of their screenshots. And UStarCraft and Yuang28 is the same person on YouTube and Twitch, respectively. He does both some after-the-fact casting for the StarCraft Evolution League, as well as some Brood War casting. And thanks as well to Enki Alexander, who organizes some events and also does a lot of the live Spanish casting on Twitch and YouTube. It's been a pleasure to speak with you all today. I hope I'll see you all next time, and I hope to see you all at the next SEL.